By 1950, after 4 years of Juan and Eva Perón's extravagant spending and mismanagement, the booming Argentine economy began to falter. As rising inflation wiped out all the economic gains the workers had made, they took to the streets, staging mass demonstrations and threatening a nationwide strike. Tensions continued to escalate as Perón imposed martial law and brought in the military to enforce his will. Anyone who opposed him was exiled or thrown in prison.
I was jailed for 4 months and tortured for supporting a railway strike. I was indicted by the law regarding crimes against state security that rendered people practically defenseless and imposed very tough penalties.
Perón also took control of the Argentine press. If a newspaper dared criticize his administration, he would send in state inspectors who would close it down for failing to meet safety codes. He used these kinds of methods to shut down La Prensa, the country's most famous independent paper. As Perón's strong-arm tactics destroyed the last vestiges of his reputation as a man of the people, his wife's hold on the affections of the poor became all the more critical. By 1950, some thought it might be the only thing keeping Perón in power.
She says that she plays a unique political role. She is the bridge of love between the people and Perón. She is what binds the masses, the descamisados, with the leader. And she knows that there is no one else who can play that role.
Juan would need his wife's support more than ever in 1951 as he ran for re-election. And she was, as always, eager to help, but this time she asked him for something in return. Evita wanted to be vice president of Argentina. August 22nd, 1951, at a rally of more than 1 million people, Perón, standing above the crowd on a balcony, announced he would run for re-election. But as prearranged, Eva's supporters kept calling her name until finally she arrived and joined him on the balcony. The crowd urged her to accept the nomination for vice president, but she appeared to hesitate. Not until the shouting had reached a frenzy did she finally give in, saying, "I will do what the people say." It was vintage Evita. She played this scene like a pro, making it look as though she was bowing to the will of the people. And it all might have worked if the Argentine military had not intervened. From the beginning, Perón's fellow officers had never approved of a woman taking such an active role in the country's political affairs. And now, if she was elected vice president and something happened to Juan, she would be their commander-in-chief. In no uncertain terms, the generals told Perón if Evita did not renounce her campaign, there would be a revolution. Perón had no choice but to tell Evita to step down. 9 days later, in a national radio broadcast, she declined the nomination she had worked so hard for and wanted so much. "I am not resigning my work," she said, "just the honors." Evita would never get another chance at the vice presidency. Afterwards, people debated whether Perón had done everything he could on her behalf.
I don't know to what extent Perón's Machiavellian mind wanted Evita to be vice president. I don't know if he didn't take advantage of this resentment within the military in order to prevent Evita from overshadowing him. While Evita was doing foundation work, giving out gifts like a fairy godmother, everything was okay. But to share the government with her was somehow to share the power. And I don't think Perón liked this.
I don't think that he was jealous, but he was torn. He was torn between what he saw she was doing for him and what, in a way, he owed to her, and what his political instinct and his military training told him.
It was a tremendous disappointment for Evita, and it came at a difficult time, for in recent months she had not been feeling well. She had very little energy, and she was losing weight fast. She put off seeing a doctor as long as possible, but finally a number of specialists examined her and concluded that Evita had uterine cancer.
And that was very sad, because I think that she believed she was immortal. She believed she could do everything, and that invasion of her body by cancer was a very devastating thing. I don't think she had the strength to fight it.
Though he tried to keep up appearances, Juan Perón was also shaken up. It was the same disease that had killed his first wife. And by the time Evita was diagnosed, there was nothing the doctors could do. The cancer had already taken hold and was spreading through her body. But by now, Evita was either so loyal or such a rabid fanatic, she refused to rest. Exhausted and obviously ill, she was still determined to help her husband win his campaign for re-election. Perón had to physically support his wife as she spoke from the balcony of the State House. "If I leave shreds of my life on the wayside," she told the audience, "I know that you will gather them up in my name and carry them like a flag to victory." On election day, Evita was too sick to go to the polls, so she cast her ballot from a hospital bed. But when Perón won, nothing could keep her from attending his inauguration. She looked pathetically small in her fur coat as she rode through the streets in the open car on the way to the State House. Evita was only 32, but her once photogenic face was painfully thin and her smile was strained. This was the last time Evita would appear in public. In the days following the inauguration, her health declined rapidly. One of her friends remembers being shocked by the sight of the First Lady in her sick bed.
Ya no era esa muchacha joven, radiante de vida, llena de fuerza.
She was no longer a young woman, full of life, full of strength, with those glittering eyes, with that natural beauty of hers, with that white and smooth skin. She looked at me. She let 2 tears go down her cheeks. She was very worried. She was worried about what would happen to Juan Perón.
Our biography of Evita will continue here on A News on Biography. July 26, 1952, at 9:42 in the evening, all Argentine radio stations interrupted their programs for this special bulletin. The Sub-Secretariat of Information fulfills the very sad duty of announcing that Senora Eva Perón, the spiritual chief of the nation, has passed away. Eva Perón, the First Lady of Argentina, was dead at the age of 33. To millions of Argentines, Evita had come to represent a hope for the future, a promise of a better life, and they mourned her now with deep and heartfelt grief. This woman who had been born in poverty got the kind of honors normally accorded a president. When it was announced that her body was at the Ministry of Labor, that building was heaped with flowers. By the end of the day, there was not one flower left in the shops of Buenos Aires. One of the greatest crowds in Argentina's history fought to pay last respects to Evita. It was a mob scene that first day. 8 people died and more than 100 were injured in the crush to file past her coffin. The lines that finally formed stretched literally for miles.
Se emocionó el pueblo.
The whole population was in mourning. They were out in the streets, and I was there too. During 3 days, we stood on line to see her. It was cold and it rained. There were people who would get to where the coffin was and pass out. Everything was very sad. Evita's death was the worst loss suffered by the people.
It was unbelievable. You had to be there to see how much those people were suffering. She had done so much for everyone. They were there wondering what would become of them. Who would help them? They were left without hope.
Juan Perón was devastated. He had lost his beloved wife as well as his political partner. And there was concern that without her by his side, his days as president were coming to a close. A grim-faced Perón walked behind the gun carriage carrying Evita's coffin in a final procession through the streets of